On today's show, KB and I talk about Dark Phoenix, the last X-Men movie helmed by Fox. What were our initial thoughts? And was this the proper way to finish off the X-Men franchise? Also, Jessica Jones Season 3 has dropped. We have a non-spoiler discussion on the final Marvel show on the Netflix streaming service. And speaking of streaming services, we discuss an article asking if the DC Universe streaming service can survive. And then, on the final countdown, KB and I list our top 5 favorite X-Men. So join us, will you, as we converse about some very dark and powerful women on this episode of Free Your Geek.
By the power of Grayskull, Autobots, roll out.
Trumpet time! You have failed this city.
Winter is coming.
Star-Lord.
Finish him. Hadouken! Fatality.
Why did you make me do that?
Look at me. Focus on my voice. I'm not giving up on you, Jean.
She was my friend.
You're my family, Jean. Stop, no matter what.
Stop.
And welcome to Free Your Geek. I am your host, Jay Free. With me is KB.
What's up?
And why did you make me do that? Why did you make me watch Dark Phoenix?
I don't know.
We're here today.
Jedi mind trick.
Pretty well. Now that's a Disney property, so this is a Fox property. So we're going to be on totally different pages with that.
Not anymore.
Well, that's a very true statement. I think it's going to be very interesting. We're going to start off by discussing our thoughts on Dark Phoenix, and then we're going to be talking about we're going to go into heavy spoilers with Dark Phoenix, but then after the break, we're going to talk a little bit about Jessica Jones Season 3, where it's going to be a non-spoiler overview. And then we're going to stick to the streaming services. We're going to go from Netflix to the DC Universe streaming service, talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to rank our top 5 favorite X-Men. So starting right off, KB, I'm gonna kick it off with you as I get my notes out here. What did you, just overall opinions, and again, as we mentioned, spoilers abound for the Fox property, the last X-Men film in the Fox property, Dark Phoenix. Thoughts? Go.
I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. I think really it was a hodgepodge of different things that they probably just put together with all the reshooting and things like that. That being said, the typical X-Men action was there. The stories were there, but they weren't perfect. But is it really any worse than some of the other X-Men movies? Or it's definitely not better. It's not anything that the MCU's ever done, but I just feel like it was okay. I don't think it's as bad as the critics were trashing it, but it was an average movie to me. Little rushed, a little. The movie is a little rushed. The story is a little crazy. They don't focus on Jean enough, which is one of the problems that I had with it. Is we don't really focus on her. Just there's kind of a lot of time. I don't want to say time jumping, but with all the X-Men films, it's like Magneto and Professor Xavier don't seem to age. Like, if you think about the timeline of X-Men First Class.
Was that, 65, 62?
Exactly.
Like
exactly. And now we're in 1992.
It's 30 years later.
And they still look. Michael Fassbender didn't even have a gray hair on his head. You know what I mean? So it's like, there's things like that kind of can make a movie feel just feel off. And I feel like the X-Men franchise has always had that problem. I remember Jay Free had a beef with Cyclops in the Wolverine movie. a long time ago.
I had a problem with Cyclops and X-Men Origins
Age-wise.
Wolverine. Age-wise, like where it was set in the 80s.
Yep.
Which is at the same time he was part of the X-Men, so it could align. It was a different actor, but they also had Emma Frost in her diamond form in X-Men Origins Wolverine, but then she was fully grown as the White Queen in X-Men First Class,
which is before,
which was 20 years before X-Men Origins Wolverine. So it's like then they tried to retcon all of that with Days of Future Past, so they basically wiped out
They tried to reboot it,
right. And again, to an extent, it's fine, but now so we're assuming the prime timeline in this X-Men franchise movie is the one where Mystique is a hero.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I'm fine with like artistic and creative liberties with that. I just feel like it's more because Jennifer Lawrence is the biggest, theoretically speaking, objectively speaking, is the biggest star in this movie.
Sophie Turner was like 5th on the star list.
Right, and the movie is about her, or at least her descent, and they used Mystique as the catalyst of Jean going off the rails.
Yeah.
Again, spoilers, but they killed Jennifer Lawrence's character pretty early in this movie. What I did like about the movie, though, I agree with your point about the time frame and the time being off. What I did like about the movie, though, is I liked how it, even though it was kind of shoehorned in, that it took place similar to the way it happened in the comics with the Phoenix Force incorporating, and inhabiting Jean's body. I think they went... In my opinion, they could have done 2 movies. This could have been the first movie and then see her go dark in the second movie. But I will say it was head and shoulders to me above Last Stand.
Yeah.
But it had some of the same problems where it was just kind of like shoehorning in mutants. And like, for example, in Last Stand, there was a Psylocke. There was... I forgot what the
Caliban.
Was it Caliban? I don't know if it was Caliban in The Last Stand, but there was another one that moved in shadows, and it was just like all and Jean was just had basically split personality disorder, like a borderline schizophrenic, and it was like her evil side, as opposed to a power that corrupted her. Which this took it a little bit different. They still went the route of her being like having trauma as a child, and Xavier using questionable methods. And again, to your point, I think they rushed through so much of that story.
Are you thinking of Apocalypse?
No. I'm not thinking of. I'm thinking of The Last Stand. So there was a version. It wasn't Olivia Munn who played Psylocke in Apocalypse. There was a Psylocke in The Last Stand that was on Magneto's side.
Wow, I forgot all about that.
And there was another one that had that little metal thing in the bottom of her lip that Storm kind of like.
Yeah.
And then there was the other guy that turned like he had spikes shoot out of his skin.
Yeah. You know what kind of disappoints me in if you want to call these, well, I wouldn't call them trilogies, right? But in the whole X-Men universe, the first time, the second time, it fails in the fact that it doesn't use the characters correctly. There are so many characters that just don't get used or don't get put in enough, or Juggernaut's a good example. Colossus is a decent example of like characters that just like there's no development.
I'll put it this way. I'll save that for a little bit because that's a lot of my sticking points on when we get to the final countdown. When I get there, I'm going to talk about why I picked them because they're also my favorites, but how they could be used in the MCU moving forward.
I can't wait to see what the MCU does with this. It's going to be a while.
Yeah, it will be a while.
Few years.
I think it'll be the Fantastic Four that they're going to focus on first, but I have some ideas that I can do here as well when we get to the final countdown at the end of the show. But overall, I agree with you. I don't think it was the worst movie.
Yeah, critics were killing it.
And again, it's rushed. It's being panned. But I think it's coming at the point now where we've had so many amazing MCU movies. I think critics
can't compare it
or
to
fans are like trying to compare it, where it's like you have to kind of separate that and say
exactly
within the X-Men universe, I think it's head and shoulders above Last Stand. I think it's head and shoulders above Apocalypse. And X-Men Origins Wolverine. I think it's even above that.
Yeah, so it's not the worst movie.
Right. I think it's middling. And I even think, it could probably be on par with the Wolverine. I think in my opinion, the top movies in the X-Men franchise universe has been X2 and Logan. Those are, I think, the two best out of all of them. And then Days of Future Past, I think,
was pretty good.
Is good, and that kind of goes.
Looking at it separately, it's pretty good. Yeah.
X-Men 1 was good. X-Men First Class was really good.
Yeah.
Again, they're taking liberties. Not that I have a problem with that, but to your point again, when they get to the timeline, Alex Summers is a young man in 1960s, and his younger brother is 20 years younger than him.
Yeah.
I can get that Alex would be older than Scott, even though traditionally it's the other way around.
Yep.
Scott's the older brother. But to have, like, you know, oh, here's my younger brother Scott, who is, you know, a young 19-year-old kid or 20-year-old kid or 20-something-year-old kid at Dark Phoenix timeline. So there's got to be, what, like a 20, 25-year difference
Something like
between
that,
their
yeah.
ages. And I don't know how I feel about that. And again, I can suspend my disbelief to a certain extent, but
Yeah.
I think it gets to a point. But overall, I don't think it was the worst.
No, the great action.
Yeah,
You know, great
well,
action
I was gonna say,
sequences. And
the top things for me were the nod to the comics with the
Yep.
Phoenix Force actually entering.
good
Jean's.
effects, good special effects.
Special effects I thought were
Really
amazing. But the thing that got me, you know, I know you want to mention a certain character that you want to go ahead.
Dazzler.
Yeah, so
Jay Free had a Dazzler in his pants when he saw that.
All right. First of all, that's inappropriate. Listen, we're
We're still PG-13. Come on.
we're explicit on the podcast, but come on, dude. That's just a little much. No, I did like seeing that character though. I think that I like the nod to the character.
Here's the other thing that I kind of am really not disappointed about, just more like just sad about is like we had some great character development that, or characters that I was kind of excited to see get to come through, like with Logan, right? With X-23, like with the MCU kind of buying that now and owning all of that. It's like, what's going to happen with that great acting job that was done in Logan? And, you know, that character, that X-23 has a great storyline now in the comics. So I was really excited to see something with that come off that Logan movie. You know what I mean? And develop, you know, New Mutants and all this other stuff. The other one that I was thinking of is Dazzler herself. Dazzler was played by Halston Sage, who is on, if anybody watches the Orville. She was on the first season of the Orville.
I did not know that.
She's a real cutie. She's a good actress. So kind of disappointed because I think she's perfectly casted for the role of Dazzler, and now that's probably gonna.
But
fall
again,
apart.
to our previous objections to the movie, in the comic books, Dazzler actually plays a really big part in the Dark Phoenix.
And again, a character not taken advantage of.
Right, and it was a nod to the comics, and we'll talk a little. Like I said, I don't want to keep like prefacing this and you know saying listen to the final countdown, but I have so many gripes with some of my choices on how they were used in the current X-Men movies that I have such a problem with.
I will say this: they did show her powers very well for that short time.
They did, and again, it goes back to the special
It was
effects.
a good situation of like being in the woods and able to like do all that light and like I thought it was really awesome actually.
I thought the plot was, again, to go back to that too.
I was just talking about Dazzler's thing.
No.
Yeah.
But you just reminded me when we were talking about characters not being used. Characters that were used. What happened? Like Quicksilver was like in like 3 minutes, and then he was like taken out of the whole thing.
You were looking forward to another one of those scenes where he just
and I get that. You can't always go back to that, and then they kind of psyched you out with
but
that.
people enjoy that.
Right, but let's talk about Beast and how quickly he turned
Yeah.
against Xavier after all these years. Like, they didn't really build any of that drama for me. It felt rushed. And then, obviously, Dark Phoenix is the villain, but let's talk about the person kind of positioning her and, for lack of a, like, basically pointing that weapon. I don't even know what the character's name is, that alien.
Yeah.
Like, and I read the reports that they did a bunch of reshoots because it was too similar. They were going to use the Skrulls,
Yep.
and then they went against that. but it's still similar to the Skrulls that they can assume different identities. But again, it was just kind of like it was a paper thin plot device for like the villain saying like, oh, I'm going to manipulate this Phoenix Force because it destroyed my people, but now it's like the way to bring my people back.
And you don't really get a lot of that till very late in the movie, or at least like halfway through.
Right. And
The understanding of it.
And it kind of, and to the point that we've talked about for other things, we talk about, speaking of Sophie Turner, going back to the Game of Thrones side of the house, where, you know, a lot of people were disappointed by this season because they felt the storylines were rushed.
Yep.
They weren't properly, you know, given time to breathe and show like the angst of the characters building up to those moments. It was just kind of like, here's this, here's this.
We're done. We're out.
And
So
while it
let's
made
rush
sense,
Yep.
it would have had more of an impact had it had room to breathe and build all that suspense. And I think it's the same thing with this movie. I think that they could have done again, I think they focus a little bit on Mystique being the catalyst for why Jean's out of control, and they try to shoehorn in a bunch of different things.
There's the other thing I know, I'm sure you've noticed it too in pretty much all the X-Men movies, is that there's always Logan is the exception, but there's always a focus on where Magneto stands and Magneto's story, and like even in Apocalypse, like there's a focus on his story, and it's like, I love Magneto, I love the character, I do love the story, but if the movie's not long enough to stand on its own, it's kind of taking up space, if you get what I'm saying. So like here, like they go to basically the island where he has his mutant refuge.
It's a sanctuary,
the sanctuary, and it's like, again, building on something that he's doing or his feelings, his emotions, and it, I don't want to say it felt like a main plot, but it felt like it was right along the main plot.
Well, I think it was important, and I'm gonna repeat this and repeat this and repeat this. If it had more time to breathe, because I love the dichotomy between Xavier's methods and Magneto's methods.
And I would have appreciated that if we had a 3-hour movie.
Right.
Or 2 movies, like you said,
And I think that the fact that he's now trying to use Jean and realizing that what Jean's done
is worse
up until the point, and that was the kind of the biggest gripe I've had about this movie was similar to Batman versus Superman, where Batman's beating up. Well, no. Listen, let me tie the two together. Batman is thoroughly thrashing Superman, and Superman says, "You have to save Martha," and then all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, your mom's name is Martha. My mom's name is Martha."
Oh, you mean like when his switch goes off?
Yeah, like Mystique? We need to work together. Where Magneto at this point is like all about helping Jean until he finds out that she killed Raven. Yeah. Then it's all like, blah 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 blah. I'm gonna like now have I want to attack Jean and kill her. Like where he was just helping her after like he'd been talking to her saying, "Whose blood is that on your shirt?" He knows she did something irreprehensible and something that she has to that she's dealing with. And then once he finds out it's Raven, of course all bets are up. But it's just like it's so quick.
Yeah,
you
don't get time to digest it.
No, it's just it's just a lot. It's rushed. It's not a horrible movie, but like I said, I wouldn't even put it in the top 50% of the X-Men movies by Fox.
And I thought we weren't talking about Batman versus Superman anymore.
No, we can go back and listen to that one, our older episodes where KB went on his rant. But
have your kids cover their ears.
Well, any final thoughts before we go to break?
What's your score on a 1 to 10?
5.
See, I think that's harsh.
Really?
Like a 6.5, 7, somewhere in that range. Because I just feel like the special effects were amazing, and like the trains, the battle sequence on the train, I thought was excellent to me.
Okay.
I really did. It's just like you saw a good use of all their powers. The Magneto scenes were fantastic in that.
You say what, 6.5, 7?
Somewhere in that range.
Okay, so where would you put something like Days of Future Past?
Days of Future Past.
I'm just trying to get a gauge of where you would rank things here.
See, I like Days of Future Past a lot. Like to me, that was like an 8.5. Like,
okay,
I like that.
I'm just gonna go through it. Some of the ones X2.
X2 was like a 9 for me, 9.5.
Okay, First Class.
8.5, 8. I like
Apocalypse.
About on par with the Jean Grey movie, like 6.5, 7.
Okay, how about Last Stand?
Last Stand, 5.
Okay, see, I'd give that
5.5.
I'd give that about a 3. So that's my barometer, and then I'd give X2 probably a 9, 8.5.
I loved X2. I thought it was really.
And
good.
then Logan, I'd give probably 9.5. Like that was
Logan. Well, Logan be 9.5
Logan's
too.
the best to me out of all of them.
But I loved X2. I loved the whole Nightcrawler scene at the beginning was just amazing. That was it was like probably not amazing now if you watched it. You know what I mean? But like back then at the time,
absolutely,
it was phenomenal. So, but yeah. So you gave it. What'd you say?
I gave it a solid 5, right in the middle.
And I gave
it
6.5, 7. So I don't think you're wasting your money seeing it.
I would highly recommend you wait for it to come out on DVD or Redbox.
See, with the special effects, I feel like it's worth it.
I would wait for it to come on FX.
FX.
Yeah, wait till it's in syndication on FX.
Not even Netflix. FX.
Yeah, FX. Don't worry. The commercials will actually.
It'll be free with Disney Plus at some point.
Perhaps, yes.
Because they're going to use the Fox library. So.
All right, folks. Well, we're going to go to break. When we come back, we're going to give a quick overview of some Jessica Jones, talk about some DC Universe streaming platform, and then get into our final countdown.
Who are you?
The better question is, who are you?
Are you a scared little girl who answers to a man in a chair? Or are you the most powerful creature on the planet?
I don't know who I am.
Yes, you do. You're the girl who everyone abandons.
Maybe they had good reason.
Because what's inside you? You're afraid of it because you think it makes you bad, evil. All the words you've been taught to keep you in line. Words created a very long time ago by men with very little minds. They can't begin to comprehend what you are.
Hey guys, I want to quickly tell you about 4041 Media. It is a collection of podcasts in the southeastern Massachusetts region, including For Your Geek, and we are proud to be part of the 4041 Media family. So check out 4041media.com to listen to For Your Geek, or if you happen to be a movie buff, check out Movie Theater Time Machine. Or if you want to know why the crazies do the crimes that they do, check out the Psych Your Crime podcast. 4041 Media, by listeners, for listeners.
Hello?
Jessica Jones. You are a cheater. You were given every advantage, allowed to make mistake after mistake. You can't control yourself. You have no discipline, just brute force.
What do you want?
I want you to die.
You're still a hero if nobody thinks you are? Like I give a shit what other people think.
And welcome back to the Free Your Geek podcast. I am still Jay Free, and with me,
I'm still KB.
luckily. Now we're going to talk about, so we started with Dark Phoenix, spoiling that. Now we're going to give just a quick overview of a non-spoilery Jessica
Because I
Jones.
haven't seen it.
KB hasn't started
I've not
it yet.
seen it.
Quick shout out to my buddy Brittany. She hosts a podcast called Thoughts with Tracy and Brittany. She actually sent me a message, I believe the Friday that it dropped, asking me, she's like, you need to
Tell me
DM
about
me.
this.
You need to DM me when you finish this because we need to talk about it. I am 12 and a half episodes in. I got about 15 minutes left.
And then I came over.
Yeah, KB showed up to record the podcast. I said, get here at this time. He showed up like 20 minutes early. I was like, okay, that's fine. Let's just do this. I'll pause it. But again, I want to give just a quick overview. So KB, do you remember the first two seasons?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so we know the first season it was kind of like dealing with PTSD with Kilgrave.
Yep.
And then the second season she kind of, finds out her mother's alive. Yep. And at the conclusion of the second season, and spoilers if you haven't watched it, I'm going to give you 3 seconds. I wasn't even talking during those 3 seconds, but Trish ends up shooting Jessica's mother. Mm-hmm. So we kind of pick up like a year later. I'm not going to spoil everything else here. I think it starts a year later, and we have the same old cast of characters. Jessica obviously dealing with the fallout of all that. We have Trish. We have Malcolm, who Malcolm is probably like the character development of Malcolm over the 3 seasons. I think has been so good.
Just the first 2 seasons that I saw was awesome.
We still have Jerry Hogarth, who's again played by what's her name, Carrie-Anne Moss.
Yep.
So good, Trinity from the Matrix movies. So what I call her, and I think she does her character so great too. She's so like manipulative, and she's always like she's so good. She's so good in this series, and there's a lot of stuff going on with her. I'm not going to give that away, but our main villain, which you heard in that little tag, is a guy by the name of Salinger, and without giving too much away, he just believes that Jessica is a cheater and she's fake because she's cheating with her powers, and she didn't earn them, where he has multiple degrees and doctorates, and he's just very, very smart. And I don't know the actor that plays him, but he is so creepy, and he's so like slimy and just makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up.
You need that after the Kilgrave after first
right,
season.
And I think that was good because it's not like a Kilgrave where he's morally bankrupt and he doesn't know right from wrong. This guy does, and he's thinking he's superior.
He has a purpose.
Yeah, and it's different. Like Kilgrave was like he had this power and he was a sociopath.
Yeah.
This guy is absolutely like off his rocker, but he's intelligent and he's calculating in a different way than Kilgrave was. And it's just so interesting. It's a game of cat and mouse between him and Jessica. We also meet a new love interest by the name of Eric. He's got a really cool backstory too. I won't spoil that. But overall, I think it's way better than season 2, and I think it's almost on par with season 1. I think that's how close we are to it. And Jessica Jones,
been getting great reviews.
Between Jessica Jones and Daredevil, I don't know. I don't know what my favorite series is. I know a lot of people prefer Daredevil, and I get it because it's gritty, it's dark, it's violent.
It's a bit more action oriented,
right? Where this is a lot more film noir, which is like I think it reminds me of detective work. Like if you're a video game guy, it reminds me of like Heavy Rain.
Yep.
Like very very much a game like that where it's kind of like there's all kinds of different suspense and there's you don't know who's playing who and where whose side whichever, and everybody switches sides. It's so interesting. So I definitely recommend checking that out. So KB, once you finish that up, you're gonna have to talk to me, and maybe we'll do like a quick KB review on another podcast just when you finally finish that, or at least get around to seeing it and start telling the listeners what you think of Jessica Jones season 3.
I'm looking forward to it though. Like based on what you're saying.
Yeah, it's
really
great, and I think right now, I mean, but it would have been either a toss up between this or another season of Daredevil. If the Marvel series are coming off Netflix, obviously we know that's happening. All the other series have been canceled.
I'm really sad about that.
I am too, but again, from a business standpoint, if Netflix is putting the money into this production and Marvel is starting their own service that's going to be competing with them, like why would you be putting in?
No, I understand the business point of it. I definitely understand the business point of it.
But I'm just hoping that with the Marvel streaming service with Disney Plus, I am hoping that they can get some of these because Kristen Ritter nails it as Jessica Jones. I was never a fan of anything else she's done. Yeah. But this is just like I love her. I think she's got the character so down.
It's the character she was born to play, like Ryan Reynolds in Deadpool. It's like I'm not comparing the characters or I'm just comparing what the role is for the actor. And the thing is too that really kind of disappoints me with this whole thing is that we know at the end of Defenders what happened to Daredevil. You know what I mean? We know he's out there, and then he came back, and it's kind of like I just was so looking forward to. I know some of the shows got like I know Iron Fist got punched in the mouth review wise. I know Luke Cage didn't get the best reviews, but I liked all the shows enough where I was really looking forward to the universe moving forward.
And we might that's still all up in the air.
Could be on Hulu.
It could be. And I also want to point out, though, real quick, that Rachel Taylor, who plays Trish Walker, as much as this season is a story about Jess, I actually, again, talking about Brittany, like I was telling her, I said, I feel like Trish and season 2 was a very selfish character.
But you could see the build-up.
And they've led to something where I wasn't even liking her at the beginning of this season. Now seeing where her character has progressed, or as the story's gone on, I won't give it away, but I am so like, it's like this actress or actor, I don't know if they like to be called actresses or actors. I'm going to just go with actor because I think it's just fair across the board. But Rachel Taylor is unbelievable as Trish Walker, as much as Kristen Ritter is as Jessica Jones.
They have good on-screen chemistry too.
They truly do. They truly do. And I'm a big fan of both of those ladies, and I think they both really bring it, and it's just a very exciting, very interesting, very plot and twisty season of Jessica Jones. And if they had to go out with a series, it would either be that or Daredevil for me. But again, we talked about Netflix being a streaming service. We said what's going to happen now when it goes over to Disney Plus. But from the other side of the comic book realm, let's talk about the DC streaming, DC Universe, the streaming platform. I
haven't even tried it. I was thinking about it, but then I kind of just...
Well,
I have too many streaming services.
I appreciate your candor, but I actually am going to, in the show notes, link to a article from ScreenRant.
Go ahead.
And it's the title of the article is DC streaming service falling apart. Is it falling apart? And they list a couple of different things on why they think it might not survive. And I purposely, similar to last week where I didn't give KB any information on the Avengers game, I'm doing the same thing here, and I just want to get his opinion. So the first point they make is the way that they already scheduled the shows. So they mentioned that the DC Universe original TV show schedule was released at Comic-Con during the summer of 2018, revealing the first of DC Universe's upcoming original series would be Titans.
Yep, I remember that.
But it wouldn't premiere until 1 month after the service launched.
So people had no reason to initially
buy it.
Yeah, that's a mistake.
The second point they make was Swamp Thing, which I hear is getting amazing reviews, was set to take an extremely dark horror movie-like approach to its source material, courtesy of Saw director James Wan's involvement. However, the show was unexpectedly cut from 13 to 10 episodes and then canceled almost immediately after the first episode aired of season 1.
We still don't have a reason on that.
And they haven't given us
a reason.
So of those 2 points, let's talk about that real quick. What do you think? I want to get this streaming service. I have not.
I'm surprised you haven't already. So you're such a DC guy.
I am. I love DC. I think it's unfair that a lot of people compare the MCU movies to the DC movies. I mean,
people feel like that's the bar,
right?
But the bar is so high.
Well, and it's a different universe.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily need everything to be dark and gritty. I think the first Wonder Woman movie was fantastic.
Yep.
I think Aquaman was good. I still have my problems with Batman versus Superman. I know
Suicide
some people
Squad
like it. Suicide Squad, again, I don't think it necessarily had to be like this awesome Avengers-like movie.
Everybody wants that.
It was just, kind of like a throwaway. Not even a throwaway, but just like the characters, like here they are. Okay, Harley Quinn, Deadshot. Those are the two you have to really worry about. Everything else is kind of like it's characters that are disposable because it's the Suicide Squad. Yep. Any one of them can be killed at any point in time. So I don't think you have to have this big and again, I know the movie had a lot of editing issues where the Joker was actually supposed to be the villain of the whole thing. It was, but again, my point is that I don't like to necessarily compare. It's comparing apples to oranges.
Exactly.
I don't necessarily like all the darkness the DC movies take, but I still like to support them because I like the characters. You know what I mean? That being said, I want to go to the third point, and I think this is the most telling.
Oh, the second point I wanted to get to.
Yeah, go for it.
So Swamp Thing, now I haven't seen it. Obviously, I don't have the streaming service, but I've heard great things about it. So why shoot yourself in the foot? It just doesn't make any sense for them to just cancel it out like that, and I just don't get that from if you're struggling, and critics like it, and if people are liking it, unless something happened with the actors or directors or whatever, that's going to be a huge mistake probably for them down the road if this whole thing fails. If they fail, people will point to that and be like, this is why. So that's why I just wanted to touch on that.
Here's the kick. This is why I think this is, of all the 3 reasons I listed here, this is, I think, is going to be the kicker right here. In October 2018, just 1 month after the launch of DC Universe, Warner Media CEO John Stankey announced a new streaming service would launch late in 2019, which would draw from various Warner-owned brands, including HBO and Warner Brothers Entertainment. The proposed Warner Media streaming service was framed as a competitor to platforms like Netflix, Hulu, and the upcoming Disney+. So Warner Media service is expected to cost $16 to $17 a month and include HBO, Cinemax, and the Warner Brothers' vast library. Content including New Line, the CW shows, Adult Swim, DC, Cartoon Network, the Criterion Collection, and more. So the question is, will the DC streaming service be absorbed into the Warner Brothers, into Warner Media, or whatever they're going to be calling that?
I think they already feel like it's going to fail.
So I think the fact that
they already know it's going to fail.
The parent company is already launching something where, so now not only can the CW shows start on the DC Universe streaming service.
All the movies are in the Warner Brothers library.
All the movies are going to be going there.
Yeah, so, I mean, and what are they paying for DC Universe now? Like $7? It's not that expensive.
It's not that expensive, but again, if they roll that up and they say, hey, this Warner Media is $10 a month, but if you want the DC streaming service part of it's an extra $7, so $17 a month.
Or maybe that's how they're going to try to save it.
Perhaps.
say, hey, you know, for $20 a month, you know, at $4 a month, we'll throw this in. Maybe it becomes an add-on to that service at some point, because it doesn't sound like it's doing very well. But I hear a lot of the shows have been. Some of the shows have been pretty good. Because was it Doom Patrol, or is that on CW, or is that on the?
No, Doom Patrol. Doom Patrol's again getting great. Titans was getting like rave reviews. Swamp Thing was like killing it.
Yep.
And Doom Patrol was also again totally quirky. And that was another argument in the article, is that it's not cohesive like the MCU. But I didn't want to include that because it's like, again, you have
it's a moot point.
Even using the even the CW shows, you have Arrow, which is dark. Flash is a little lighter. Supergirl is very hopeful, and then Legends is just like bonkers and silly. Like, that's fine. Same thing with and the other argument is, if you want to compare it to Netflix and the Marvel shows, Daredevil has a different feeling than Jessica Jones, which has a different feeling than Luke Cage, which has a different feeling than Iron Fist. So like, you really can't, in my opinion, compare that and say, well, they didn't have the same, it's not a cohesive universe. It doesn't have to be.
If you're making a good product in your shows, like, that should be all that matters.
That's exactly right.
And that's what I'm saying, is like, if this fails because they're canceling stuff that they shouldn't, and I mean, that's just silly. It really is.
Oh, KB. You know what I want to do?
What?
I want to get into our countdown.
All right, let's do that.
Ladies and gentlemen, we haven't done this for a very, very long time.
It's the final countdown.
And to spare you KB singing, I'm going to put the actual... All right, KB, knock it off.
It's the final countdown. The final countdown.
And it is the final countdown, and today we're counting down our top 5 favorite X-Men characters. So I'm going to let KB start off, because I'm
going to guess Jay Freeze.
Oh, that's good too. Okay, so why don't you give me your number 5?
No, I'm going to guess them right now.
Oh, okay.
Number 5,
talking to the...
Number 5, Dazzler. Number 4, Dazzler. Number 3, Dazzler. Number 2, Dazzler. Number 1, Dazzler. Jay Free has a completely Dazzler countdown.
I am dazzled that you got all of those wrong. All right, KB, go with number 5 and shut up.
For me, again, and we're not just talking about movies. I just want to remind people, we're not just talking about movies or TV shows or comics. We're just favorite X-Men, period. And we'll probably talk about how we want to see them in the MCU a little bit. Number 5 for me is Blink. I really, really like Blink's character. Loved it in the Age of Apocalypse comics. Kind of disappointed that she wasn't part of the movie, really.
Right.
The TV show, The Gifted, character was done fantastically. I watched both seasons.
It was Jamie Chung, I think, that played her.
Yep, it was fantastic. And also the Externals comics as well. I just love the character, and again, I just feel like it's one of those properties that Fox did not use to its potential. To see her in the MCU, I think, would be pretty exciting. Especially, maybe if they start doing like Avengers versus X-Men kind of stuff.
What if they did an Exiles movie with all
Exiles,
and they could use
that's what I was thinking of, Exiles, not Externals. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Exiles.
Yeah.
So like, if they do an Exiles movie, like that would be fantastic. So Blink is definitely one of my favorites. So she's my number 5.
My number 5 with my little audio clip.
I don't have audio. I'm not cool like Jay Free.
Leave him alone, Sinister. Your fight is with me. My body. This is impossible. So, you like playing God with mutants' lives? Well, just keep away from my friends!
I should preface that all of my picks are going to have audio clips from the X-Men animated series. So my number 5 is Cyclops. Now, everybody's typically a Wolverine fan, and everybody like, the Jean Grey, Scott, and Wolverine love triangle. I'm always Team Scott, because Cyclops to me is, and they never got him right in the MCU in any iteration. He was always just
in
like
the MCU.
Thank you for correcting me. In the Fox movies, hopefully they get him right in the MCU. My issue with him is that he's always like the Boy Scout, and he's always like the following the rules, but he's also the soldier. So you want to talk about, like we talked about, I very briefly talked about the Wonder Woman movie. Like, think about Steve Trevor in that movie.
Yeah.
Like, Cyclops could have characteristics similar to that, where he's like, he's badass, but he's a soldier, but he's honorable.
And he's a leader, like he's like the Captain America of the X-Men in a lot of ways.
And I just feel like in all of the X-Men movies that Fox did, he's been an afterthought.
It's not portrayed correctly.
He's always been like the goody two-shoes, which he is, but it's also like the fact that Wolverine's like, you're going to tell me to stay away from your girl, or even the fact that he just went out like a punk in The Last Stand, where Jean just like kissed him and like disintegrated him or whatever. Like, I just feel he got punked out in every movie. Even in Dark Phoenix, he was not used properly. The whole thing is like you're supposed to see the connection between Jean and Scott, and there was very little of that even in that movie. So I think that's one character that if once they come over to the MCU, I think needs a total overhaul, and to show him how badass he is. He's got an awesome kick-ass power. He's like he knows he's a strategist. He knows how to send his team. He knows what the value of the mission is, and I think the best iteration of Cyclops we got was probably in the animated series, and the original 90s animated series.
I agree with you on that one.
So that's my number 5 is Cyclops.
Number 4 for me, Professor Xavier.
We might have totally different picks. That's awesome, though.
Yeah, that would be good. To me, like Professor X, I mean, he's the heart and soul of the X-Men, obviously. One thing I did like about him in the Dark Phoenix movie was the regret for what he did to Jean. I thought was interesting side of the character that we don't get to see that often. Like a lot of times we see him, just as the humble leader, and there was a lot of like, hey, this is your ego getting in the way. We see scenes of him in the movie with the president and going to like receive some Medal of Honor and things like this, and it's just like they put a good little twist on his story, which was good, because it's not just a typical run of your mill Professor X kind of is just the support of the whole thing and leads and so I do like James McAvoy's Xavier, but I liked Patrick Stewart's Xavier too. I didn't have a problem with them, but Charles Xavier is just one of my favorite characters, and obviously the dynamic with him and Magneto is one of the most fascinating stories about the X-Men and their difference of opinions of, Charles wants to save the world to prove that mutants, are not a threat.
They can peacefully coexist.
Peacefully coexist, exactly. And you have Magneto with that whole opposite of like, no, we're the dominant species here. And they were best friends that both went through the Holocaust. And it's interesting that they get totally different personalities based on coming out of that. So, again, I just love Professor X. I think it's a very important part to the whole X-Men universe. So
I agree, I think he's like the moral compass, and it's funny that he can actually kind of waver in that morality from time to time too, and that makes a good character.
Yep, absolutely. So that's my number 4, Professor X.
My number 4.
No, he's right. So all people are flawed and all struggle with their capacity for sin. None likes to be reminded of our shared human weakness. My appearance does not make it easy.
Don't it make you crazy?
It did once, but then I found peace by devoting my life to God. He directed me to this place where they value the character of my heart, not my appearance.
So my number 4 is Nightcrawler. I love
good pick,
Kurt Wagner. There's going to be a theme from 4 through 1 with the dichotomy of certain characters. I love the fact that Nightcrawler is very peaceful. He's very religious, but he looks like the spawn of Satan. He looks like a demon. And I just love that, like that difference, the Jekyll and Hyde almost, if you will, of the two and how it kind of like ties together.
Like an evil gargoyle.
Right. And I think moving forward, we talk about the MCU. I think, again, we talked about X2. X2 was amazing. X2, he had a great part in.
And we talked about that opening scene that just set the tone for that movie.
Right, and I would have liked to have seen more. And then I think he was used pretty well for the most part in Dark Phoenix as far as like his power set.
And where his character was.
I think they needed, but they didn't flesh him out as a character as much. So I was very kind of disappointed with that. So I'm hoping if they bring him into the MCU, I think it should be a little bit later of a movie, and I think you should establish Mystique, because I would like for them to do the speaking of dichotomy, the evil mother
You want to do
giving birth,
the daughter son, the
mother
son thing.
Yeah, and I think that'd be a cool little concept. So I like his power set. I like, just the way that his characterization. Again, to me the big thing is the characterization of all these different X-Men that we're talking about, and just the fact that he is so peaceful, but his his appearance is one thing, but then you get to know him, and his personality is the exact opposite of what his outer visage tends to bring to the forefront of your mind. So that's my number 4, Nightcrawler.
Number 3, next on the list for me, is Rogue. Jay Free's like looking at me.
Okay,
like,
no.
I want to hear this.
I'm just curious. Go ahead.
So like for me, like I think one of the best parts of X-Men stories is the, how do I say it? Like the tragedy of some of them. The kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Can't find it. Anyway, to me, it's like with Rogue, her powers in the way that they work are just, it's such a gift and a curse. If you think about it, it's kind of the truest ideal probably for a mutant, right? Like your power is both your gift and your curse, and it's so well played, it's so well thought out, and that ability to steal powers or to take powers, is something that never really got flushed out in any time that she was used before. We're talking the first X-Men franchise. Second X-Men franchise, First Class, and all that, she wasn't even used. Barely. Was she even in one?
She was, no. It was for First Class, again, a separate timeline.
Yep, so it's
the only time she's brought in was Days of Future Past, where they kind of merged the two timelines.
Yep. So, again, just not fleshed out. I didn't like the characters kind of being like the kid. Like, that was one of the things I didn't like with the first X-Men franchise was basically it's like she kind of took Jubilee's place.
Right.
In the kind of the relationship with Wolverine. Yeah, or Kitty Pryde, yeah. So I just feel like the character just wasn't done right. But to me, those great tragedies for the character that cause conflict and cause pain and for them to feel that pain and then overcome that pain and then feel it again, it can make you really feel for a character and dive into it. And it can rip your heart out sometimes. And it can make you happy and excited for the character, depending on what they're going through or how they're using their power or what their power is doing to them personally. So Rogue is definitely my number 3. I definitely prefer X-Men, the animated series, Rogue, over kind of the way that she's been portrayed, in the movies. And I hope that if she does go to the MCU, that's what we kind of see, a more adult Rogue, more of a actual hero Rogue than kind of just the straight kind of drama childish Rogue that we've seen. So that is my number 3, Rogue.
Well, the reason I was making that smiling face, because my number 3...
You have great strength as well as great beauty. Why do you wish to become merely normal?
Because I don't want to live my whole life without knowing what it's like to touch another human being.
My number 3 is also Rogue, and I have my notes here. The reason, because she is a powerhouse, I have on my notes tragic powers, to your point, is very, she can't touch, and it's like the one thing, she's a very lovable and loving person. Mm-hmm. And again, I think you can tie that into my earlier, if we were to bring her into the MCU, we already know Carol Danvers was running around in the 80s and 90s.
Good point.
We could start off with a young Rogue in one of the earlier movies, working along Mystique. And then I think on my notes I said maybe we could see something similar of like a redemption arc for her, starting her off in the first movie almost as a villain. Mm-hmm. Think about, we kind of saw that with Loki a little bit in the Thor movies where he's like starting to like come around, and then obviously he dies in Infinity Wars. But like it's one of those things for me, like I love the redemption arc of a character, and I think Rogue basically, running away from home after her tragedy and stealing those powers, and then getting Captain Marvel, and maybe just having, because she's part Kree or whatever the Tesseract did to her, kind of she saps some of that, and it gives her the invulnerability. It doesn't give her the photon blasts, but she's got that flight, she's got that invulnerability, and she still has her power sapping abilities, and then
the strength,
and then you have that strength, and then boom, there you go. Now you have. The
character you can use,
and for the future MCU. So that's why she's my number 3.
Moving on, folks, to number 2. Numero dos.
Dos.
For me, X-23. I really have. It's one of the few comics Jay Free knows that I used to really hit the comic book store hard, but I switched over to the Marvel Unlimited service. But one of the few books that I still get every month is X-23, not X-23 or Wolverine or whatever she gets, whatever series she's in. I really like the whole idea of that she's a mutant that was built, that was, designed, that was an experiment, that was, cloned, and like that to me is like a really big, different story that we haven't really seen a lot of yet. Obviously we see a little bit of it in Logan, but I just feel like that story, and the actress that the girl that played in Logan was phenomenal. Little girl, top notch. She looked like a professional. I read something that even the actors were like scared when she was fighting because of the faces she would make, and like not scared, but you know what I mean. They made them cringe.
But that, and then the emotional parts.
Yeah,
the emotional
parts.
Oh my god,
it's just so good. And I just feel like that's one of those characters that just didn't get flushed out under the Fox banner. So for me, I really want to see it in the MCU, and I want to see some justice done to it. I don't think I want to see her be Wolverine as she is in the comics. But out of those comics, she actually has a younger sister who she finds is like a clone, as well.
A clone
from the
of
program.
her or a clone of Wolverine?
A clone. They share the same. They're sisters, so clone of Wolverine.
Interesting.
Yeah,
very interesting.
Honey Badger, who she takes in, and then they start to have different opinions on what being a hero is and stuff. So I'd like to see something like that. I think even in the MCU, she's not going to get a ton of focus. I just don't see that, but I'm hoping.
I think it would be like a if they were to do an X-Men, I could see it like maybe at the end of the second or third movie, and then spinning off depending on how many sequels they have, or if they decide to do an offshoot of like an X-Force, and they have like a Wolverine-led team where a bunch of I don't know if they do that because it's like it kind of goes against the whole PG-13. But again, we also know that Deadpool, so I don't know.
Yeah, but maybe it could be a series on like Disney Plus or Hulu or something. Like, I just feel like it's a character that, and the comics do sell well as some of Marvel's best books right now. Even the harshest critics seem to like it. So, so I really think that it would be wise for that character to be in the MCU and be done justice. That's my number 2, X-23, Laura Kinney.
My number 2.
Worthington is no more. Now there is only Archangel. Let the world beware.
My number 2 is Archangel, and I really, again, going with the themes of these characters. We started with, I mentioned Nightcrawler with that, the looking like a demon but having a very peaceful soul. Rogue, with her the tragic powers. Archangel's another one that he was, in the comic books, he has like this great power. One of the founding members of the X-Men. He has these feathers, wings. He can fly very fast, like hollow bones. He gets to a point where he gets suicidal. His wings get impaled. He ends up crashing a jet. Apocalypse finds him, gives him techno-organic wings, brainwashes him to be his horseman of death. And then once he's freed under Apocalypse's thrall, he kind of goes back and forth with this like angry vengeance where he just wants to like hurt people and his true personality. And it's just Apocalypse has gotten into his soul. And it's just such a cool dynamic where it's like this guy, when you think he had everything to live for, he's like this playboy, kind of like this Bruce Wayne type where he's got all this money from his he's inherited all this money from his family. And he's just, he's got these really cool, like a really easily to be concealed powers too, because he could just tuck his wings and he could live the life and pass as human. And then Apocalypse gets his claws into him and just turns him into this killing machine. And then again, talk about the Fox movies going into the MCU. If they ever bring him into the MCU, I'd like for them to start with the original 5 X-Men. That's what I'd like to see them start with.
Old school.
And just start from there and build it up. And I'd like to see him being used, because even in The Last Stand, he wasn't used that well, the Angel, because with the mutant cure, because he's out for they didn't flesh his character out. And then even in Apocalypse,
at least they kind of got the story right. they didn't flush it out enough, but at
to
least
an
they kind of
extent,
got it.
but it's just
right,
I feel
but-
like
I get
again,
you. I hear you.
where's the tugging on the heartstrings with the ties to the X-Men, that this is their friend, this is the guy that they grew up with and they started this team with. Like, to me,
That tie was never really there,
right?
Yeah.
He was never even
any of the
mentioned.
movies,
So to me, it was like, if they could do it right, where it's like he's one of the founding members, and to see the characters go through all that heartbreak as he gets transformed into Apocalypse's Angel of Death, I think it would just be so good. So
It would be.
And I really like that character, so that's why my number 2 is Archangel.
Number one, numero uno. For me, it's Magneto. It has to be Magneto for me. I just feel like, despite all of the issues I've had with X-Men movies, that part of the X-Men movies has always been his story. His stories are always fascinating to me. His mentality is always fascinating to me. His look at the world is fascinating, and he's that necessary villain in the X-Men universe that you need. But at the same time, here's a guy who can also be a hero when he wants to be. And it's just really, really interesting to me how his character has evolved over the years, how his powers are just... In First Class, we kind of see Sorlem evolve as well. So, like, I just really, really love the character, man. I don't know what else to really say. And obviously the dynamic with him and Xavier is fantastic. And Xavier number 4 on my countdown. So
I'll say a piece about him too. He's not on my list. He's actually an honorable mention. I didn't choose any villains. Honorable mentions to me are Mr. Sinister, Juggernaut,
another good one,
and Magneto.
Juggernaut's another good one too.
Those are my 3 favorite villains. Juggernaut, I think, edges all of them out.
Yeah.
But I think that what Magneto, the thing about a good villain, is that you can kind of relate to what
exactly.
their method. Even though you don't agree with their methods, you can understand where they're
reasoning,
coming from.
yeah.
The reasoning, because Magneto, again, to your point, he doesn't want to say like all mankind needs to be abolished. It's just that you won't oppress us anymore. You can't oppress our species. And he sees Homo sapiens superior, or Homo superior, as a higher tier than Homo sapiens. And where Xavier wants them to coexist, he's like, no, I've lived through one group
Holocaust.
of people
Yeah.
thinking that they're better and they should be oppressing these other people. I will never let that happen again. And how can you hate on that when you know that's like where he comes from, what he's suffered and what he's dealt with? It's like you almost can say, I justify the way he feels. And again, you might not agree with his actions. It's the same argument you can talk about with the Punisher. Everybody loves the Punisher. Oh, I'll kill, but he's a villain.
Yeah.
When you really think, or an anti-hero, he's a killer.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like we have laws and rules for a reason. Yeah. And, for somebody to take the law into their own hands, right, wrong, or indifferent, whether you feel justified or not, it's still wrong in that sense. Yeah. Even though it might not feel that way, it is what it is. And it's the same thing with Magneto in the sense that his methods you can agree with, but I can't justify what he's doing, even though I agree with a lot of his feelings and thoughts and his whole mentality.
Yeah, and it was depicted very well in X-Men First Class when they were in the concentration camps and the doctor messing with him, or
even the first X-Men movie.
Yep. Yeah. So very, very good stuff with him, and I think he's probably a tough character for the MCU to kind of work with.
I think he's like along the same lines of like the Green Goblin within Spider-Man. Like he's their key foe, and he can even be in the background through a lot of it if you want.
Yeah.
But I think you need to include him. I think moving forward with the MCU, I think you could do a Mr. Sinister, or we've already seen kind of some iterations of Juggernaut and Apocalypse, but we could do a Shadow King.
Yeah.
We can do
I like Shadow King.
We can eventually go to the Shi'ar and all that, the Starjammers. We can bring that, and we can bring in a different Sabretooth. We can bring in, Mystique and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, or the Brotherhood of Mutants, the Blob, Toad, Pyro, Avalanche.
Cuckoos.
The Stepford Cuckoos, right?
Yep.
There's so many things you can do, but I think at some point Magneto has to be pulling the strings, and then he's the main villain. He's the one that you build up to. Just like the Avengers, everything built up to Thanos, and they had medium threats. I think it's the same thing. Either that, or you start off with Magneto and you build up to Apocalypse.
I mean, they need one of those guys. They need either him or Dr. Doom to kind of be the center of the next.
I think it'll be
phase. Doom. I think it should be Doom. I think it really should be. So that's my number one, Magneto.
All right. For anyone that knows me very well, my number
Dazzler.
one. Nope. That's why, KB, you don't know me very well. Here's my number one.
It's over, Bill.
Remy, don't leave me again.
This is not my home. I am not thief or assassin. I am an X-Man, and I'm never coming back.
My number one is Gambit.
The man Jeff wants to be.
I do want to be him. I love Gambit. Again, I grew up as a young child. But my first introduction to the X-Men was X-Men. It was like in 1991. Jim Lee, X-Men #1, the gold and blue teams. We focused on the blue team, and it consisted of Wolverine, Cyclops, Beast, Psylocke, and Gambit. And Gambit to me was just the coolest because everybody loved Wolverine, and Gambit I think was like kind of like indicative of the 90s too. You know, he's like we talk all again from all the different other characters having like these dual personalities or dual. Gambit's another one who's like a thief. You would think he's a thief. He steals. He's like the equivalent, almost like just more of a scummier version of Aladdin, if you will. Like, you know what I mean? Like he's a thief with a heart of gold, and he does some underhanded and some devious things, but in the end he always tries to do the right thing. And I just think it's very, very interesting. And then him and Rogue having that like Romeo and Juliet type of relationship where it's like, you know, they're meant to be together, but he can't, you know, he's the thief that stole her heart. It's so like poignant and so poetic. And I just think for him, just like, and then just some of the backstory that they were able to bring into with him, you know, kind of being like the guy that led was it not the Purifiers? I can't remember, to the Morlock tunnels.
This is something we haven't talked about. I wonder what's going to happen with that Gambit movie they were developing.
It's probably going to sit on the shelf, or it's going to go straight to like a Hulu or whatever the streaming services would be. Yeah.
You know what I always liked about Gambit? His dynamic with Wolverine, too. Always like they just it's very similar to Wolverine's dynamic with Scott in a way.
Yeah, but I think with
but he cares about Rogue more. Wolverine cares about Rogue more as, I think, even if I remember the animated series correctly, even kind of as a little sister, you know,
or as
but it's
a
more
colleague,
Jubilee.
somebody he trusts.
Yeah, somebody he cares about in
some
way.
I think it's like Wolverine and Gambit are almost like very similar, cut from the same cloth. Like they both have a tendency where they can do some very bad things if you know the situation provides. Where Gambit's a little bit more like devious, and I don't think Wolverine trusts that. But I think there's also a respect there for both of their skill sets that they bring to the table. Because I remember the first Gambit limited series is that Wolverine was like, there's a murder, Gambit has to go back to New Orleans, and Wolverine's like, you want me to come with you? He's like, no, this is a family matter. And then it leads to Rogue and Wolverine sitting there, where Rogue finally admits that she's in love with Gambit, and Wolverine says, you know, your relationship, the way you feel about each other, reminds me of myself and I think it's Mariko. I forget. I can't remember her name. You know, but it's just like he recognizes that the love that they have, and he respects Gambit enough to offer it to go with him when Gambit turns him down. So I think there's an understanding there. But I just like the fact like his power set, plus he's just a really, really good thief. Plus it's almost like he leaves his old life behind and learns to be a better person, but then that old life keeps trying to pull him back in. And I like the dynamic there. And then they relaunched the comic a couple of times. They made him into almost like a spy.
Now him and Rogue are married in the comics.
Right. But I mean, even before that, they made him try like a 007 James Bond type, you know, betting all these, and that's cool. But yeah, then they did Mr. and Mrs. X. Is that what they call it?
Mr. and Mrs. X. Yep.
And I really enjoy that comic series.
Oh, you've been staying on top of that one?
Yeah, I've been not like, I'm not probably like 2 or 3 issues behind, but like I really, really enjoy it. And I like the fact that the characters had so much growth, and they've done some.
The wedding was interesting, so I don't know if you caught the wedding part of that.
With
Mr. and Mrs. X, like
it was supposed to be Kitty and Colossus.
It was supposed to be Kitty and Colossus, and they decided not to get married. And they're like, and then, you know, Gambit and Rogue were like, you know what, let's do this. You know what I mean? Everybody's here. Why let this go to waste? So it was kind of a nice twist in that comic because what was funny was like I was still buying on paper at the time, and like just like the Batman Catwoman wedding, like all the covers were like, oh, you know, all these like wedding specials and things like that. And then you get there, and it's like, nope, doesn't happen. Same thing with like Batman, Catwoman. Just if you haven't read Batman, sorry.
It's almost a year old, so it's like, you know.
Yeah. So, you know, the fact that those things didn't take place, but at least in the X-Men thing, we got probably what a lot of fans kind of wanted to see or were hoping to see at some point. And like you said, that comic's very good. I really like that.
I enjoy it. And to kind of cap it off, who Gambit reminds me of, and I know they've already asked him, or there were hints that they were asking him to play him in the movies before, I think, Channing Tatum, was Josh Holloway, who played Sawyer from Lost, because again, very, very similar type of characters. Where Sawyer was kind of hated at the beginning, but he was kind of like from the female demographic. He's a good-looking dude. He's got that southern.
But he's still got that grimy kind of.
And he's a con man, but he's also like
a rogue.
He's a rogue, but he longs to be a hero, and he wants to do the right thing, and he tries to take care of people. Yeah. It's very, very similar to Gambit, and like, I don't know, ever since like the early 90s, and then the animated series just made me like Gambit like the most.
Yeah.
And
the power's awesome too, you gotta admit.
And before we close out and say where you can find us, I want to go to one more quick Gambit clip, which is my favorite line that Gambit's ever said.
I'll take these.
You must like to play cards.
I like solitaire, okay? Unless I got someone to play with.
So unless I got someone to play with, Gambit always being the flirtatious self that he is. But yeah, that was the final countdown.
Good countdown.
So this is the area of the show where we talk about the bat signal, where we talk about where you can find us. We have Twitter,
Facebook,
and Instagram for Your Geek on all of those. We're going to be posting a lot more. I post almost daily on Instagram when I remember to. I have a DC calendar page a day, and I keep posting that, and I post the pictures of the shows that we're doing, so you can check those out. Follow us. We're on Podbean or iTunes. Just search for Your Geek. Find that Ninja Turtles logo, or the we can't actually say Ninja Turtles logo, one that fits the similar Ninja
Shadow Turtles.
Yeah, mutant hero turtles, as they're known in England, I believe.
Teenage Shadow Mutant Tortoises.
Sure, exactly. Cowabunga,
man.
Hang 10, dude. Yeah, so you can find us on all that. Or visit us on our website, Free the Geek. And you know what? Reach out to us on Twitter. Reach out to us on Instagram or Facebook. Tell us your
download us on Podbean.
Well, tell us your 5 favorite X-Men characters.
Absolutely.
We'd like to hear from that. Give us that, and then KB, just finish it off. Hit him with your catchphrase.
Get your geek on.
That's it. Well, I thought you were working on another one.
Nah, I'm lazy.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.